I do community work in New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. And I've been around enough, I don't know about here, but at one time in New Orleans, you couldn't sit in a multiracial setting like this. And maybe y'all been doing this all your life, because I know y'all pretty progressive in this town is what I heard. Is that true? And so y'all very diverse is what I'm heard. But in New Orleans, you couldn't do this before the 60s because there was a law against it. Then there was a civil rights bill that was passed in the 1960s saying because of federal dollars that everybody should come together. But even then it was very difficult. And what I realized that anybody that ran any social service programs in Louisiana were predominantly white. That's just the way it was during that time. So I can remember the first job I had in a predominantly white social service group was called the outreach worker. And I did that job for a while, but what I noticed in working with predominantly white groups is that they never talked about racism, culture, history. We believe any work you're doing, we don't care if it's church work, community work, you got to talk about racism straight up and not be confused behind it. Predominantly white groups want to give services, but they want to give people skills and tools. Now, when you do any kind of community work, you got to have skills and tools, is that correct? But we say if you give somebody some skills and they haven't dealt with their racism, they can become a skillful racist. Are you following me? And then they get certified. So I'm saying that to say is that we think racism can be undone if you know what has been done. There's no question in my mind about it. A lot of folks don't think you can do it. First of all, there's a lot of reasons we can talk about in a 2-day workshop, but a lot of times we find that people talking about what to do about racism do not have a clear definition of what it is. Everybody gives their opinion and their experience, and that's important, is that correct? But to deal with institutional racism, you got to have more than your experience and your opinion. You got to know what you're talking about. And even in the black community, there's confusion about racism. Let me say that slowly again. And I need to finish saying what let me finish saying what I need to say, then you can ask some questions at that point. I need to complete what I'm saying, otherwise you won't hear understand what I'm saying. So I'll be glad to talk with you toward the end. I got to finish saying what I need to say. So the question that we're saying in the black community, there's confusion about racism. Do you think that's true? We talk about it loud every day. We demonstrate. We out in the streets every day. But the data shows in the black community, we still at the bottom. We die more. Our infants die more. We get stopped by the police more. And with all the understanding we have, there's still confusion about racism. And we talk loud sometimes. You can talk loud, I mean you're clear what you're talking about. And what we found over the years, we've worked in every part of this country and parts of the world. Even when we come to communities of color, we say, what is racism? Everybody, again, will give their opinion, their experience, but do not have a working definition of it. You understand? And we ask folks now what it is. What would you tell me what racism is? What would you tell me right now, out of your experience, quickly, this quick response, what is racism? What would you say? Anybody right here, what would you say the definition of racism? What would you say it is? Anyone? Yes?
I'm Jalen Duchesne. I would define racism as holding someone back based off of their race or treating someone differently than you would everybody else just because of their race.
Excellent. Anybody else? What would you say the definition of it?
Political way of holding down a particular race.
That's excellent. Anybody else over here?
I would say a group or a faction of people that put themselves above or control the destiny of somebody up under them.
That's correct. Anyone else on this side? The definition of race, because we talk about it all day long. We say we want to stop it, want to do it. What is it? Out of your experience. Anyone else over here?
System of power based on race.
System of power based on race. Now, okay, now we've had several quick definitions, and all those definitions or experiences are real. But in the 2-day workshop, what we would say racism has to do with race, prejudice, plus power equals racism. It's like an equation, but it's not enough to just say that. You got to break that down. You know, what does prejudice mean? What does prejudice mean? To do what? It's a prejudgment. Now somebody walk up, somebody say, well, you prejudice. It's almost like saying they're racist. We use that word interchangeably. But prejudice don't necessarily mean racism. Prejudice means a prejudgment. And it can be a neutral thing. I tell my daughter, don't take candy from a stranger. I got a prejudgment. That's not a bad thing. But we use that language interchangeably. When you define what race is in a 2-day workshop, we explain what a race means. Everybody checks a race off, but you ask them what it is, they say, well, it's how I look, it's my blood, it's my features, it's my culture. It's none of that. Racism was something that was just set up many, many years ago. And yet we sign a race, not even sure what we signed. Then we say, how do you define power? Power is anyone who has legitimate access to institution sanctioned by the state. And when you come into one of our workshops for 2 days, we make it very clear that white people are racist because of their privilege. I got a couple of head shakes in here. We say white people because that's what we say. It takes 2.5 days to go through that. You can't do that like we're doing right now. Otherwise, you can argue all day long. But no, we don't have that. We tell you what. We give you a sense of it. When you come to the workshop, we say because they got unearned privileges. And when I talk about a privilege, anybody can be a bigot, right, including black folks. Is that correct? Yes. And we can have racial prejudice, but racial prejudice is not the same as racism. We got to become social scientists with our language. Okay. We talk about it all the time. We in the streets. We get discriminated against. Police kill black folks in the street every day. We're clear about that. But it ain't just the police, it's the whole judicial system that messes us up. And not only that, it's also the school system also kill our children. Yeah. And including the lovable children that we love so much too. Is that possible? Yeah. I see a few head shakes, I don't see too many. Sometimes we can't shake that head because we got certain things in it. See, the dominant culture will put stuff in our neck where we can't even shake our head in a rhythmic way. And it's really sad to do that because we get put. And then if you have an interracial, know each other, a relationship, you don't really want to say nothing in front of your friends. I can't say that. If you come to our workshop, we're going to say it straight up. Because one of the things what racism does is something called internalized racial oppression. And we talk about it in the 2-day workshop. That has to do with a pathology. For people of color, these institutions, these systems tell us not only that we have bad housing, bad health, it also gives us pathology that we sick as well. And I ain't never been treated for my sickness. It tells people of color that we inferior. It tells white folks that they're superior. So we working together in a multiracial setting and won't know why we don't work together well. Because you can have all the programs in the world. If you don't deal with that internalization of that sicknesses, you just got another program that's programming our community. We're saying you've got to have a working definition that everybody on your team understands and is clear about. Because sometimes everybody want to do a program. And then when we do a program, we operate out what we call a needs analysis. That's where most of us operate, out of people's needs. But if you talk about someone's need and don't talk about the causative factor that creates the need, because institutions create needs, is that correct? Do anybody here belong to any organization, a community group at all? Raise your hand. Church group that's trying to make a difference. Do y'all have any kind of programs y'all operate with? Do y'all operate in these programs as helping folks with their needs, or do you do that with their needs? Now, and within your program, have you ever been to a retreat with your group, your church group, your community group, to develop something called a new mission statement? You ever did that? Every organization does it, and if you haven't done one, you will go to one because they do it every 3 years. And here's the key about it, about a mission statement. What we do, we say it's got to be concise, not too long, and we must have the word empowerment in it, which is a joke. How you going to empower the community when you have not done a power analysis? Most of us operate out of a needs analysis, a do-good analysis, a victim analysis, a paternalistic analysis, or a white man's burden analysis. We got to take care of them because they really can't take care of themselves. And we say, if you're going to empower somebody, and first of all, you can't empower people because our community already have power. You can help them get a sense of their power, but only the mighty can empower someone. We're talking about empowering the community. Our community already has power, and you're not going to do that if you're operating out of a needs analysis. I want to help the poor black folks analysis. This ain't about just helping people of color. The issue is that somebody's making money off this arrangement, and none of our programs address that. Can I get just a couple of little heads, make sure. None of our programs is dealing with that. Now yours may be different because I don't know anything about your program, but if you're only operating out of a needs analysis and helping folks with their needs, then what you're saying, something's wrong with our community and we got to help them because they got a behavior problem. We got to talk about what are some of the causative factors that create the need. Right. Anybody here writes grants, works with groups that write grants to get money for your program? It'd be interesting to see what you do, because most of us who write grants, what we do now, we say, I work in the marginalized and the minority community. You ever seen that kind of language? That's called linguistic racism. How you gonna say I work with a minority? What you saying, I work with the less than people? Because minority means not only numbers, it means less than. And everybody's working on language. And again, that's language can hurt you. We say sticks and stones can break our bones, but words can create my reality. So if you're operating with an organization, you say, well, I'm just using this now just to get the money. If you keep calling your community at less, marginalized, minorities, people can internalize that, and you also add to the oppression through your program work or your do-gooder work. And we're saying, we're talking about an empowerment is a process. And the work that we do at the People's Institute, we do a thing, we respect the needs, because people have needs and we got to address that. But if you're only operating out of a needs analysis, that becomes a problem, a real problem. So we do a thing called a power analysis. And we show how institutions and systems impact community. Many folks what we call single issue. Well, how many issues you working on? I'm working on 2. I'm working on 3. I'm working on 10. It becomes competitive. And sometimes we think we're doing a lot of good work when we work on a lot of issues, or we put one of those brochures together with all the bullets on the side, and we think we're doing good work. And sometimes anywhere in the world you could put all that stuff on the side, you being effective in your work. You may be trying to impress the philanthropists, but it sure ain't taking care of effective work in your community. And everybody's talking about leadership development. How do we develop leadership? You know, well, to me, you can't have leadership without accountability. And we would encourage you, when you do come to the work that we do in a workshop, we're going to spend time. Let me ask this other question. How many folks in this room serve and work with poor people? Poor people. I'm talking about economically, not poor in spirit and none of that kind, but economically poor. Might even have 2 jobs, still can't make ends meet. How many folks work with poor people? Okay. How many folks in this room used to work with poor people? How many folks got poor folks in your family always borrowing money from you? Let me raise your hand. Okay, I got your hand up now. I got more hand up. How many folks in this room make money off poor people? Make money off poor people. Let me see your hands again. And don't put your hand like this because I can't see. If you do, I'll need you to see your hand high, because sometimes we don't want to acknowledge that. And some of y'all may not be making it directly, but you make it off books. You make it off coming out of social work school. You get that experience. Many of us make money off poor people, you know, but you ask folks, well, I work with poor people. I bet most folks have not sit down and asked this question. If I work with poor people, then why are they poor? Every organization, every church group ought to ask that question before they hire anybody, including people of color. And I don't care if they come out the poor community, that don't mean we even clear ourselves what it means. Because you may hire somebody who got negative feeling about the people they're serving. Is that possible? I've seen caseworkers hard on their people than anybody else. So we're saying you really got to make sure everybody on your team has an analysis on why people are poor. Does that make sense? Because to me, if you're going to be effective, you got to have that analysis, because we just assume we sort of experiment on poor people. Now, we say how many folks make money. The other question is that, what are some, give me some examples. If I ask you why people are poor, give me a quick example. What comes to your mind when I say, why are people poor? What would you say right away, off the top of your head? Just throw it out to me. Just throw it out. Lack of resources. What else? Lack of opportunity. What else? They're born into it. We call that a cycle of poverty. My grandmother was on it, my great-grandmother. That's called a cycle of poverty. Disenfranchised. Sometimes they don't know they don't have the access to it, or sometimes it's the educational system, lack of education, and in some cases it's miseducation. Is that correct? Yes. Now tell me, give me some stereotypes why people are poor. Now let me first, you sound like a choir. We had 10 folks said lazy. Why can't we say that so quickly? That people are lazy. You think that we learn that some way? You say, well, I don't say that. Well, if you heard it enough, you don't have to say it. Sometimes people can feel your vibes or how you feel about them. Is that possible? Yes. So we're saying is that when you're talking about working with poor people, and you got folks you've hired, and the folks you've hired got negative stereotype about the people, and you want to know why you're ineffective. Does anybody have advisory boards or policy boards? Advisory boards or policy board? Anybody? It'd be interesting to find out if your policy board, advisory board, if they know why people are poor. You got folks sometimes giving you advice on your advisory board, and they don't have a clue why people are poor, yet they're giving you advice. Is that possible? So we have to make sure we really understand. And again, in 2.5 days of a workshop, we go through because first of all, I don't have no long debate about what racism with nobody, because you can't have that discussion on one-on-one. It just doesn't work. Because everybody gonna argue about their opinion. I used to do that, don't do it, won't do it no more. I don't do diversity training. I've done that. I've done diversity, managing diversity, conflict resolution, sensitivity, and I also done something called cultural competence. Who ever been to something called cultural competence? That's the newest thing now. You know, we say if you went to something called cultural competence and you didn't study the dominant culture, something's wrong with that. I went to cultural competence. So I don't have no discussion on one-to-one. You come to workshop, we can spend 2.5 days. But to me, it never goes nowhere, because when we're talking about racism, we're talking about it inside of a box. That's why it never goes nowhere. Everybody want to tell about, it's like talking about religion. I don't spend time on it. Is it a class analysis or is it a race analysis? First of all, it's both. But what keeps class in place is race. That's the glue. Because I don't care what kind of oppression you got, anytime you add color to it, the oppression doubles. Let me say it again. I don't care what kind of oppression, because sometimes women say, well, I'm oppressed, and this will say they're oppressed, and poor people say they're oppressed. That may be true, but anytime you add color to any oppression, the oppression doubles. Whether it's women's issues, and people say, well, it ain't, it's about, why come poor white people and poor black people don't work together? Because every time they do, if we got poor white people say they might be poor, at least they're not black, because they think they're better than black people. And why they believe that? Because they've got a message at an early age by these institutions. They're telling them that you may be starving to death as a white person, but you're still better than people of color. That's the message they get at an early age inside their mother's womb. And in the black community, we get a message too, to our mothers, the way our mothers get treated, that we ain't worth a dime, that we inferior. And every institution back it up. That's why you can't use language when you're writing grants to what you work with minorities at risk, because you're adding to the oppression with that foolish language you're using. But I can't use that. Well, find another way, another language. You can start working with self-determined young men or challenging young men. We got to get that kind of a language, otherwise we're contributing to the oppression and also adding to our community's death. As I said, we've done, everywhere we go, we do this training, and some people sound there, there's people that kind of concerned about the election. But first of all, whoever got in there, we'd have been in trouble.
Right.
I know we've been more comfortable with someone else, but we hope this is going to be a motivator for us. Because if somebody else would have gotten there, we'd have sat further down on our backsides. We'd have spent, so we got to get up off it. And whining about it, this has been going on for years. Like all of a sudden he's the whatever he is, First of all, we got to organizing is the key. You can't talk this away. Everybody who's a part of our training team can't talk to you about community if I'm not involved in the community. Let me say it again to you. Some people talk about community but not involved with it. I can't tell you about leadership if I'm not developing it. And I'll tell you right now, well, I'm here right now in this town, but I'm in the point where I work in the community in New Orleans, and I don't have to be there, because sometimes you got one leader and everybody depends on. Somebody kidnap that one leader and everything goes down the drain. It's like you lose your, anybody ever got a 3-year funding for some kind of program? When you lose that, everything collapses. And the ideology and philosophy that you've been teaching goes down the drain because you're dependent on money for your infrastructure. You got to make sure when you get that money, you got to do critical thinking. I don't accept no money from a foundation if they don't come to our training. Because then when we give that little money, they want to send somebody to tell me what I did with the money. They want to come evaluate me and don't even know the value of me. So I'm not going to let them do that. Well, you can't do that. You're going to turn the money down. Well, I'm going to turn it down. See, because I got to be in control of somebody's resources, and really the money they got is my money. I hate to even apply for that money when I know it's my money. Because they ain't got it right either. Is that foundations? I'm talking about foundations. I know we depend a lot. They do a lot of control organization with that money. But also, we got to make them accountable as well, including church groups. And we do this, I say we do this every kind of denominations around the country. We do something called a youth group, called a freedom school, because this has to be intergenerational work. We got young trainers, younger than these folks right here, that can do this 2-day workshop and they adapt it to young people. We presently working at Columbia, Fordham, NYU, and this freedom school gets these young people to start teaching concepts because they got to know it at an early age. And also we have young white people coming to our workshop too, because their mom and daddy don't want to train them, so they come to our workshop. And everybody's got a program for young blacks, young Latino, young lady. Where's the program for young white kids? Does anybody get grant money? Say we need to train white kids who are confused about undoing racism, and if you don't deal with the white people, they're gonna grow up white and still be in charge. And I could ask you in this room, how many folks working with young white people? You can probably name them on one finger, even in this room. Everybody's working with children of color, which is important. But do white kids need help too? Where's their program? And many white people who are working with us right now couldn't get their mamas and daddy to change, yet they come work with us. When they come to our workshop, we say you got to go work with your mom and daddy because you ain't got no right to throw your mom and daddy away as well. And how you not going to work with your mom and daddy and come work with me? Something's wrong with that picture. When you become a runaway child and come running our communities, something's wrong with that. And we should work with all of our children. Does that make sense? No, and ask yourself, even in this town, how many folks are educating young white kids to understand racism? Because the schools are not doing it, and what programs, and whoever put a grant together said I need to get a 3-year grant to help confuse white kids to undo racism. Because if you don't do that, they're going to grow up and still wind up being in charge. Now we can talk to people here, because I know y'all progressive and y'all work together, and we can talk to everybody here, including white people. Is that correct? Give me a couple of head shakes. I hear some people color saying yes, but I don't see the white. Give me a couple. Okay, good. Because sometimes you can't shake your head with rhythm either. Everybody got to shake their head. See, because this ain't just about blacks. This is about everybody in the room. And it's not only for your organization; it's for your personal house. Because sometimes we can work with us, but sometimes your significant other don't want you working with us. Again, Donna, I just wanted to, if you could just. I want to do a little thing down with if you know about the power analysis. I just want to show you this because time is getting close on it, but I want you to know what we do in the workshop. We ask people why people are poor, and we show people the difference between needs and institutions. We got to start getting clear about systems. We always talk about fighting the man, or fighting the system, but we don't have a clear analysis about it in our experience. Now some of y'all do and you do, that's fine. But in the workshop, we do a thing called a power analysis, analyzing power. Now that sounds very simplistic, but every group we work with for the last almost 40 years, community group, nonprofit, who always talk about empowering the community, never do a power analysis. And they don't have to have ours, they don't have none of their own. You have to talk about fighting the system or empowering people. Now, I don't have the kind of degree like some of my colleagues have, so what I have to do is learn how to do a power analysis so I can feel as though I was adequate to talk about this. So where I work in New Orleans, I don't know about here, but every store, convenience store, there's young black men who hang around a convenience store, There'd be so many, they be getting out front, you gotta go in the store sideways to even get in the store. That's the young man I work with. And when I had learned how to do a power analysis, I went and try to use it on my community with them young brothers. I say, I want y'all to come to a meeting because I want to do a power analysis on y'all. I'm not gonna tell me what they told me to do with my power analysis. And what I realized, I can't use that kind of language in the neighborhood. Now, can I use one word that is a little, well, when I talk with the young men, this is what they told me. I invited those same young men the next week. So instead of using the word power analysis, this is what these young men told me. They said, Brother Chisom, we hanging in there, we trying to survive, and we're getting our ass kicked. Now, if you work in the community, you're going to hear that kind of language. Not only say they're getting their ass kicked, they're going to have some adjectives on it. See, they're getting their, you know. So when I heard these young men say they were getting their behinds kicked, we say instead of calling this a power analysis, we ought to call this a foot identification. Because our community is getting their behind kicked. But you know what? A lot of the providers also getting their butt kicked. But when you're professionals, you got to know how to adjust to the foot. You can't holler as loud because you're getting paid. So everybody gets their behind kicked. So what we do in a 2-day workshop, we identified the foot that kicks our community in the backside. We don't let nobody come work in the community unless they're willing to understand where they're working at. There are too many people know how to write grants, don't know nothing about the community, but then start operating our community. We're saying something's wrong with that dynamics. So they got to go to a 2 or 3 hours going through this power analysis. Now, a foot ID. In the 1930s, a lot of Jewish folks were put into an area called the ghetto. I don't know if anybody know that. But in the 1960s, what group of folks were lumped into the ghetto in the 1960s? Black folks were put into a term, poor black people, to the ghetto. And what's the term for Latinos where they lump all Latinos at? What's that called? The barrio. What about where they lump all Asians at? What is that called where they lump poor Asians at? Chinatown. What about Native American? Where they lump all poor Native, where they lump them at? That's where they reserve people at, right? Matter of fact, it's a reservation also means they got doubts about them when you got reservations. Now, what's the term where they lump poor white people at? What's that term called? It's amazing. When it comes to black, Latino, we know it. When it comes to poor white people, there's confusion. And there's 3 times more poor white people, because you have more trailer parks out here if there was in trailer parks. You got 3 times more poor white people. They're not all in Appalachia. We got bank presidents in New Orleans living in trailer park because of Katrina. So where the poor white people at? Social science, where they at? Maybe anywhere they want to be, I don't know. But it's something we got to know if we're going to be effective in this work. Because we can't just, we can't just understand I don't know where they at. We got to know where poor white people as well. Now, as I said earlier, we don't use the term ghetto. We got new language we use now to write grants. We call it the target area. Like that's a heavy duty word. Hell, that's a military term. The target area, or the marginalized, or the enterprise zone, or the empowerment zone, or the minority at risk. This is what describes our community. They describe the people as minority, the community, and we want to know why we caught in such a bind. And even communities of color, but there ain't no white people around, we use the same language. Let me say it again. There ain't got to be no white people around. We can't put that on white people. We do the same thing, and we some of us are structured almost like a corporation and a nonprofit. It's really unbelievable. Now, if you took me around this city here, what are some tangible things to let me know I'm in a poor neighborhood? What are some things you see right away? Because there's no signs on the highway like 6 miles ahead, slum area, turn right. So how do you know when you're in a poor neighborhood?
Dilapidated houses.
Liquor stores, Church's Chicken, Family Dollar, Super Dollar, abandoned cars, BMWs in good shape, potholes. Do you see that? Okay, that can be in any community, and it also can be in rural communities. Or you find in the projects. In a 2-day workshop, what we would do, we would keep adding a lot of things to this. There's the interstate, y'all got this Interstate 70, right? right through the community. I don't know about, but I know in New Orleans we got Interstate 10. And sometimes these interstates can create dead-end streets, on-ramps, trash accumulated, and they blame the community for it. When it's really the Department of Highways should be picking that up. In a 2-day workshop, it's down to put all these graphic, slum housing in here. Name me an institution or a system. An institution are like the police. The police get blamed for everything. But it ain't just the police, it's judicial and the penal. We do this inside prisons as well. So name me an institution or a system that impacts this community and puts its foot on its neck. It can be poor whites, poor black, poor native right now. Now, again, if you came to a 2-day workshop, we would talk straight up to you. Right now, we kind of, I'm being careful with words, but if we had a 2-day workshop, we'd talk straight up and no holding, very respectful, but no holding hands, come by, we should get along, that kind of thing. We have to talk real because some of us doing this work and not clear about what they're doing and adding and hurting our community in many, many ways. And it's everybody's doing that. So name me an institution or a system that impacts this community. Throw it out quickly. Huh? The education, and not just public, charter schools too, right? I know some of y'all got your, that's where the money's at in charter schools. I know that now, but charter schools too. That's like what else? Banks and lending institutions. Churches chicken or churches denomination? Okay, you're talking about the prayer church. Okay, churches too. Now people get. See, you saying that very strongly, but see that the ones taking them pictures right now. Let me say something. You better move away because when that lightning strikes, you ain't gonna be taking no pictures. What else you had? What else? Huh? The church, no question about it. I've seen that joking, but church plays a major role, and we love our church, but at the same time, we're doing a critical examination. We're not here to blame nobody, because we make up those institutions. We make it up, much as we talk about them. And what I realize now, I can't just work in the community, I got to work inside systems now. Because I used to tell people anybody working there was a sellout. But now I got a job there. So I'm saying we got to work, we got to get anti-racist teams working inside the institution. We can't put it down, because system are nothing but us. We make that up. Name another system. The health system. Payday loans. And let's put higher education too. Now in the full workshop, what we would do it with, we put the drug system. One of the biggest drug wars we got right now is Rite Aid and Walgreens. Like for some reason now on every corner they're building right next to each other. And the insurance company, the military, we'd put all that around there. And if I ask you real quickly, as important as the education is, and I ask you to analyze it, how does it really, you can't just put it up there, how does it hurt our community? What would be a couple of things you'd tell me how the educational system hurt the community, and we're not here to blame it because we send our kids there, we've been there. But we have a right to do a critical examination of it. How does it hurt? Tell me quickly. How could the school... High state testing. Excellent. Name another thing. How does the school system hurt our community?
Inequality of resources.
Depending on the neighborhood, so the taxes, if there's a low home ownership, you're more than likely to get less taxes, so you're not going to get the resources.
That's correct.
You get in a school district.
Is that real? Okay, good. That's correct. A lot of people are not even aware of that. They also label our children as slow learners. You've heard that, slow learners? They also say our young people got a learning disability. Have you heard that before? Could there also be a teaching disability? Why don't they label the teacher special or the school special, but they label the children, they blame it on the kids, say this special. There's different ways in teaching, but so when they can't teach a certain way, and the children have a difficulty, they blame the kids because of their ineffectiveness knowing how to educate. Is that true? Yeah. What else? How does the school system? Racist curriculum, like Columbus discovered America, right? Well, first of all, I can come to your house and discover your television, right? It's the same thing. There were people living there. Now, Columbus should be a part of the history, but they need to tell the truth about Columbus. Also, that he took his sword and used to cut folks' ears off to show the sharpness of his knife. But you don't hear that. But there's a book called A People's History by Howard Zinn that talks about that in depth. So we're not saying Columbus should not be part of history. We need to know the real history about it. And then there's books in Texas that control what books we get. They make the decisions on that. Is that true? Yes. So in a regular 2-day workshop, I'm going to wind this down because we can't do this in a time we got. But in a full 2-day workshop, we would take 3 or 4 of these institutions, how the criminal justice system, how the military system affects the community, and we're going to analyze it. Now, there's 2 concepts. One is that there's a concept called gatekeeping. What do you think that means, a gatekeeper? Who lets people in and out? Anybody who works with a program, work with the church group, even in this room, you're a gatekeeper. I'm a gatekeeper right now. I'm deciding off the top of my head what to share with you about information. I'm gatekeeping information with good intentions. But the question, nothing wrong with gatekeeping, but the question of accountability. Gatekeepers and gatekeeping organizations that get grant money can play a big role in this process because this is an arrangement. And what keeps that together are gatekeepers. If you don't know if you're a gatekeeper, I'm going to tell you, somebody who monitors, translate, interpret, advocate on behalf of others and don't bring other folks with you, you're a gatekeeper. And you're not being accountable. I used to get grant money on behalf of the community and brought no folks from the community with me and got funded. That's gatekeeping. Another form of gatekeeping, that all that work, we did a lot of work in Ferguson. And what happened, with all the work those young people did in Ferguson, they brought in certain ministers. Because a gatekeeper can be a buffer between the people that did all the challenging and now the powers to be dealing with that one individual gatekeeper. And that also can stop the movement. So gatekeeping is something that can keep us up. Nothing wrong with it, but the question, one last question, folks who work in the community, anybody ever called a community meeting and nobody shows up? Who's ever called a community meeting? A couple of times. With food too, right? And a door prize. Now, is something wrong with those folks in the community, or is something wrong with you? See, it's easy to blame the community because you've been ineffective in knowing how to reach them. But most time we get tired of it and then we start doing it for the community. But to me, even if you belong to a school, most times parents of color are not involved in that school in a real viable way. Is that true? And they love their children. We got to ask, what is that really about? Gatekeeping is something that we really got to begin to understand. And there's nothing wrong with the gatekeeper except who you're accountable to, the constituency that you serve. The other 2 concepts that we talk about in the training is the concept I told you earlier, the thing about internalized racial oppression. And these institutions that we put up here, health, housing, the media, they give a message to us at an early age. As people of color, we're inferior, and to white people, they're superior. And just for a second, some of the manifestations affects people of color are the sickness in us. Because when we come together, we say we're going to deal with the man, we want to turn on each other. Is that possible? And we don't even know where that's coming from, but that's coming from racism. Because racism don't only create injustice, it creates a pathology. Too many of us want to be individuals do this work. How you going to go downtown and work on behalf of the community with no community people with you? It's a joke. But some of us like to be downtown because some of us don't want to give it that leadership role because we get all the attention as an individual. Yeah, we saying that. You're the one leader. What kind of stuff is you're the one leader on behalf of the community and you're the one that gives input to everybody? Input, something's wrong with that dynamics. Some of the manifestations that affect people of color is something called protectionism. When we have a workshop, we start telling white people about their racism in our workshop, and somebody get emotional. We have black people get out the seat and go to hugging the white people in our workshop. Or they wasn't talking about you. We said, sit down. This ain't nothing but a damn workshop. We protect them. And that goes on the job every day where we protect white people. Another manifestation of our sickness is something called ethnocentrism. You got blacks don't like Latinos, Latinos don't like blacks, and you got some Africans don't like none of us. And say, what is that about? These are things that's going on in our community every day with every organization. I don't care if you're a professional, if you got a PhD, if you're a doctor, superintendent, and you're a person of color, you're dealing with that pathology too. I've seen policemen of color hard on their own children. That's that's a self-hate going on in us. The other one is the question of colorism. Is that an issue in our community? Light skin versus dark skin, is that an issue? Yes. And not only in the black community, the Latino, the Asian, the Native American, and it divides our family. And if somebody says, well, you mix. Well, hell, everybody's mixed. And I don't care how dark you are, you mix. And I don't care how white you are, you mix. White people be surprised when you come to their family reunion on one of those days. Say, well, I ain't mixed as everybody else. And that mixture thing, that colorism has killed our community. That's why it's hard for us to get organized. Every time we do it, some of these manifestations plays up. Another one is a term called exaggerated visibility. If young black men are being invisibilized, they get stopped by the police more, black infants die more, they get labeled more, they get expelled from what it means they're being invisibilized. So what our young people will do, they will exaggerate their visibility. You mean that like the way they do it? They walk around with their pants hanging down, gold, and we get mad. Some of that might be style. It's not all of our young people do that. But if you're going to get mad with the young people, you ought to get mad with that institution that devalues our community too. And I've been in a situation where I've been in my automobile and I've seen a brother walking across the street with his pants hanging down and looked at me and started having a conversation in the car with somebody else while I'm trying to pass. And I didn't know if the brother had something, so I didn't do nothing. But after 3 times, I say, you know what, I'm tired of it. And some demonic stuff went across my mind. So you know what, I'm going to hit this accelerator to scare that brother, and he might jump out the way. But then I said, well, supposing I get a seizure in my leg, roll over that brother, I'm going to jail for some dumb story. I left that alone. But exaggerated visibility puts a value on us, because this system is always devaluing our young people. But not only young people, you could be a professional, you could be an African American who's the executive director, and you won't have the same acknowledgement as a white director. Is that true? I need a little head shake on this side too. Because I see a couple of little funny frowns. I don't know what that means. I say, well, damn, how much time you got? I don't know what that means, but whatever time I've got, you have to keep that little thing on your face, because to me, you got to be clear about it, because some folks that work in our community have no sense of this at all, what's going on. Exaggerated visibility is not only with our young people, it's with professional people of color. And when I was coming up, I used to exaggerate my visibility. I used to wear my pants up here. Now what the hell I'm wearing my pants this high when you know you wear that high, it ain't gonna fit right all over. At least some young people got that pressure off their, if you know what I'm talking about. You got me? You got what I'm saying? But I didn't call it exaggerated visibility. I didn't know what it was. But I knew I couldn't get the things I wanted in my community, so I was taught to wear good clothes, and we get mad at kids wearing expensive this, expensive that. But this system is constantly devaluing our young people. But not only our young people, we got adults of color getting devaluated, but we've known how to cope with it much better. But we're catching hell all the time, every day. So these are some dehumanizing process. And when you've been dehumanized and you look like me, and I don't like me, and you look like me, it's easy for me to hurt you and put more value on your jewelry than on you as a human being. These are some things we will talk about, in our workshop, and much more. And then when we have a workshop, Donna Dunn talks about superiority, how white people automatically feel they're entitled. Donna, give a couple of examples of just want to hear that, because this ain't just talking about people of color. This is equal opportunity. We talk about everybody in a loving way. There's a couple of
Make America Great Again. Is that not internalized racial superiority? When was it great? Name me a time when there was equity in this country, right? But that's what we say, make America great again. Take back America, take back our country. Is that internalized racial superiority, right? So you just look at what's happening around us. Who do we scapegoat when something goes wrong, right? Who do we scapegoat? Right? All right. Yeah, so those are just some of the things. The fact that we have a sense of entitlement, that every institution's supposed to work for me. Guess what? It is supposed to work for me. Every institution in this country was set up by white people, for white people, to the exclusion of everyone else. I should feel entitled that it's supposed to work for me. You hearing me? That's internalized racial superiority. So I could go through everything that's happened in this election, and you can identify what internalized racial superiority is, correct? Yes. All right.
Yeah, so we're saying in a workshop we do, we go through all these things, and then what we do after that, we wind up giving you a definition of racism. And the bottom line is that we talk about organizing, because all this discussion is good intellectually, but how do you bring people together? How do you develop leadership? How do you deal with accountability? You know, and like I said, there's too many of us who want to be individual leaders and think that's how you do work. We say if you say you represent community, community must be involved with your work. Does that make sense? Yes. And for white people, you've got to make sure you get other white people to do anti-racist work. You just can't be friends of people of color. See, because when black and white say they're friends, and white folks don't deal with their racism, the relationship ain't real. It's a superficial, and we bullshitting each other. You know, y'all can work in a job for 30 years, and white people say, always empathizing, what can I do for you? This ain't about us. This is about you making some money, and you got privilege, and I ain't got it. So you got to confront racism, and that's the thing. White people do everything in the world, but they don't talk about racism. They're authorities on every issue, because they know if they say talk about racism, they got to talk about power, they got to talk about the hand that's feeding them for years, and then that's when they get in trouble. Being friendly with white people don't get in trouble, because we tend to embrace white people too much, and sometimes that stunts their growth intellectually when we do all that kind of stuff. We got to let them confront, because one white person has more power in a racist construct than all the people of color demonstrating out in the streets. Did I talk too fast on that? Was that clear? Sometimes I think I'm saying something real profound, and people say they don't know what the hell I'm saying, like I got an accent or something. But I don't think I got no accent. I think I'm clear. To me, I'm clear what I'm saying. So for white people to have that honest relationship, they got to challenge racism, and they got to know what they're doing. And being friendly with people of color does not do it. I told Dana when I met her, I don't know how many years ago, she'd come to every meeting and always like she don't get it. She worked, you know, I said, Dana, you ought to get together with your own people and start working with white people. We can work together, but you got to work with your people too. And Dana started something called European Descent. And the white people descent was in their name. It's been going on for over 25 years, and it's national right now. They speak out against injustice. And what I noticed for white people, that for them to work together was the hardest thing, because they say people of color don't work together. You let white folks saying working together around racism, it's one of the most difficult tasks in the world for them, because they can't detox from black people. It took down them for about a month to work without because every time they see a person of color pass, they get mourning for that person of color, a black person. We say, no, you got to stay in that room like an addiction to people of color, to start working with white people, because that's where your strength's at. That's where your humanity don't come in working with people of color. Your humanity come working with your own people, because then when you challenge them, white people don't play with racism. You know, that's why most whites, mom and dad, is much clearer about it than the young person. So you have to learn what racism is to be confronted. And people of color who love white people, you got to let them be, so they can get stronger, so the relationship can be honest. I see 2 head shakes. Can I get a couple of heads on the side? Okay, good, because sometimes people say, what the, you know, we think this is important. See, because I want an honest relationship. I'm tired of that holding hands. We should overcome black and white and all that together. I done that, got a t-shirt foot, ain't doing it no more. Because my daughter is called a minority student, and she shouldn't be called no minority student. And she gets held every day. So I'm not doing this no more. I've done it. I had diversity training, I had every kind of training in the world. But right now, we've got to talk about racism and power right now. And what I realize, even communities of color, we're not as clear as we should be about it. That's why the data has not changed in the black community. And being in the black community, we got to get serious about it. Being in the streets talking about it, is not enough. You understand? We got to talk about it with some understanding, with some analysis, and we can't be the only one in the street. We got to develop our community, our family right now. And I don't think no black person, no Latino person can work in a white setting unless they're grounded with a strong black family or a strong black community. Because anyway, white people will take you where you don't want to go at. Yes, sir.
I just want to expand this maybe just a little bit, because I'm looking at my friend right there, that when we look at racism, you know, again, it's conventional, like form. A lot of the things that have been added into the mix, especially in this election, is a lot of the immigrants. When we look at Asians, Middle Eastern people, Africans that are over here, and how that plays into this whole racism, you know, thing. because a lot of the neighborhoods, even the black neighborhoods, are being populated with store owners that are Middle Eastern, Indian, Asian descent. All of the hair stores, I can't think of anybody that's selling fake hair. They're not Korean or Chinese. A lot of these things that are infiltrating into the country that are upsetting, a lot of people, some of us got some feelings, about that, because it ain't just white folks. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of folks with this, this melting pot. And I want to throw this out here, and I want to see how you deal with it. I want you to tell me the difference, or help us explain or understand the difference between having real freedom or having liberties.
Well, I don't know if I can explain that, the real freedom.
Well, the definition of freedom.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can give you the definition. What I would say to you in reference to the so-called immigrant, we can't get distracted from folks coming in. See, because they've been immigrants here from the beginning of time. White folks have been immigrants. They don't see themselves. Immigrants is something that, when it happened, they got us, in New Orleans, when Katrina hit, a lot of Mexicans came to New Orleans to help with the Katrina. And I was asked as a community leader, saying, well, aren't those Mexicans taking black folks' job? And I thought about it for a while. I said, first of all, we never had no jobs from the beginning. I'm not going to get played into the division. We know that's going on, but the reason, one of the things I think you have to do is you have to organize in your community. You got to get your community involved, because you get caught into who's the immigrant, who's not immigrant, that these folks are taking over your neighborhood, taking over our neighborhood. There's some stuff we need to be doing on our own right now, and we entertain too much of that stuff. I'm not minimizing that. Folks come in, and a lot of times we don't take advantage of what we need to take advantage of. And I'm not going to leave the difference between the black and whites, because there's something called whites here, blacks here, and everybody fit in where they can get in. There's something different about the country when you talk about racism. And you're right, there's a lot of immigrants. And when September 11 came, and we had a lot of folks who before thought they were white, started coming to our workshop. So everybody gets played in this process. But for me, what I find, what I get my energy at, and my understanding is when I organize my community. I'm not going to spend the time, doing that. You want to add something?
Yeah, if we don't understand the reason we have racism, and the one and only reason we have racism is to make sure white people are on top of everything, to make sure that we come out on top. So we keep getting people to argue with each other about what's going around, and then I can step back and still get the superiority and get the top. So we got to be real careful, because all of us, as I say, we're immigrants. You weren't brought here on your own, but people were immigrants. But we keep taking the discussion off of the only reason that we have racism is to make sure that white people come out on top. And that, in fact, in this country, we have desegregated institutions, but we've never integrated a single solitary institution. Why aren't we talking about that, right? We've never integrated a single solitary institution in this country. If we had, we would have equity, right? Equity is what we're looking for. And what is equity? Equity would mean that you could never determine someone's outcome by their race. So if we keep these arguments going about who owns what and who's doing what, and we're talking about people of color, I can step back, man, and take everything that I want as a white person. Is that true? Yes. All right, so let's just be really, really clear when we're talking about it. I don't want you to even think that racism is just about oppressing people of color. That's a side effect of racism.
No, my brother, I want you to hear this, because you asked a question. I don't need no sidebar conversation, because I want you to listen to what's saying.
I want you to know that we will oppress you if it works for us being on top, or we won't oppress you. So it isn't about the oppression. So don't think about it just as oppression. Thinking about that the reason we have racism is the fact that we have white people that are called white, right? And as long as you develop something called white, then what that does is it's creating a hierarchy of humanity that says, I should always be on top because I am white. And every institution in this country was set up so that every white immigrant that came over here, we weren't white when we came here, right? What was I when I came here? I was European, right? And so every group that came over here that eventually became white, we were oppressed, but what did they do? They changed the institutions so they could elevate us, to keep us on top. So unless we really know the reason of it, we're going to continue to do all of these other fighting underneath. So that's why we say, please come to the workshop so that you can understand what is race. The only reason we have race is to make sure that white people are on the top. That in fact, just developing a concept called race meant that white people were able to change the entire world order. That it gave us the permission as white people to go anywhere, to colonize anybody we wanted, to oppress anybody we wanted, to steal anybody's resource. Unless you understand it, you're going to argue every other little thing that we get you arguing about so that we can always stay on top, right? And so that's what I'm just saying. We got to be real careful when we talk about it. We need to talk about the truth of it. There's nothing wrong with us as white people. I'm not saying that. It's just that we gave up our culture. We gave our history. We gave up everything that meant something to us as human beings so that we could be elevated on top. Once we understand that, then we can begin to undo it. But not if we keep the arguments going underneath it. So I want you all to know that you have every right to change those institutions so they work as well for you as they work for us. And that's what we have to do. But we keep doing a bunch of other things rather than changing those institutions. We can have equity. We can have a world where your outcome could never be determined by your race. That's what we're looking for in this country, to never determine your outcome by your race.
Well, and that was my point right there, because with all of the distractions that have been brought
Right.
forth, like making it look like it was his fault or their fault, that with all of these sub, subgroup or sub discussions going on, we're taking the focus off of the real, the real thing. I'm supposed to be afraid of him. He's supposed to be afraid of me, when that's the direction or the allocation of those funds to help those people set it up, because it comes from the people who have the true freedom that's in here. And this freedom is defined as somebody doing what they want without hindrance or any kind of obstructions.
Right.
Now, we as people have liberties that we can have. We do what we want without any controls from an authority. But that authority had already set the parameters in which we're to operate in. Those are liberties. And when we step out of that confine, then we get into problems, because we don't have true freedom. That's my thing.
No, you're right. And I would say to you that it's about us organizing our community. Organizing our community. And I would ask you, how do we organize? See, we got to figure out how to do that. Before anybody ever came, we had to figure out how to do that. And we don't do a good job at that right now. And when we don't do a good job, even in the black community, it's very difficult to organize our community unless it's a crisis. Let somebody get shot or something. And so we talk about everything in the world. I don't talk about something unless it's going to help me to organize my community. Right now, and we need to produce that. We got to quit talking about this issue, that issue, unless that issue helps strengthen the work you're doing. We operate too much. We come to meetings. We never have a base of people. And right now, it's about organizing our community. It's one of the most beautiful things we can do. Down and talk about the white thing. Even when we got to be black, we had a hard time being black. We didn't want to be black. Called Negroes, colored, and you got to be colored with ED, past tense. Then we got to be Afro-American, then African-American. And one time they had American Negroes. That even showed possession. These are our Negroes. And it's correct. That's the way. And we began to call ourselves, which has to do with Africa and America. Still don't call ourselves American. That's before anybody got here. We still didn't call ourselves American. Yet we helped build this country. White people, black is a political term. Hispanic is a political term. White folks, you've been misled and bamboozled like everybody else, because white is a political term. White people, first of all, when they come to our workshop, they don't know how they became white. They thought they'd been white. You were Irish, Italian, everything in the world, and you used to have a sign saying no Irish and no dogs allowed. But you realize if I can get my accent, change my clothing, and buy into a white thing, then you start getting access. The minute you say you're not white, and you go around saying you're Jewish or you're Irish, you're going to get dealt with in a way that's unbelievable. And many black people can say like they're confused, but it's a privilege to be confused. You know, the black person, well, I'm confused, I'm black. But if you're confused, I tell you what, the police will remind you who you are. Because we got folks coming to our workshop telling us about, well, I'm biracial, I don't know who I am. Call the police. Because they've been trained to do it. And I'm saying it jokingly, but we got to become more organized. First of all, the folks that organized this gathering, we call it the Speakers Bureau, whatever you call it, to me, it's more important than even us coming here. Because everybody can't get this coming, these folks out at a meeting. And to be out in a way so respectful, as far as I'm concerned, it's a cold night, as far as I'm concerned. I know it may not be to y'all, but I'm cold. And it was cold here. So for y'all to be here, to me, was the idea of somebody getting y'all here is a powerful thing. That's organizing. And is that correct? And it's been consistent. You've had 50, 60, 70 people. And all I'm saying, we want some of y'all to come to if you haven't been to the training, we're not saying the training is the end to everything. It will equip you with a clear analysis and not just a needs analysis. It will give you a working definition. And in the second day, it's not an intellectual discussion. It's also going to challenge you because some of us faking and fronting like we're taking care of business. You know, and first of all, there's many young people here. First of all, they need to get a clap too, as far as I'm concerned, because our young folks get talked about so bad about they doing the wrong thing. For y'all to be here tonight says a lot, you know. And young people have led the way in many ways to this country. There's been always been a youth movement around this country. So first, I just want to say I'm just, you know, the energy, I feel the love and the respect, the energy in the room, and it means a lot to us. If nothing else happens, to have our young people in the front row, right here, ought to be encouraging to us, because they get talked about so bad, they get isolated so bad, they get devalued so bad. So I just want to say to the folks here, we honored to come here, and it's clear we don't. It's about organizing. There's a group of black men that we've ever organized in this group. Is that right, Greg? There's a group of brothers, and we actually had a fundraiser tonight because I think that in the black community, communities of color, it's okay to be in a multiracial setting, but at times we need to come together to do our own healing. Because if you're not healing, because I'm telling you, we've been sick, and nobody can help us with our sick. The best therapy for sickness is working with our community. Thank you all for our time we had with y'all.